Korean Mafia boss got tricked into a blind date. The black girl who showed up changed his life forever. You know I can kill someone with a fountain pen, right? Kwon Ji-hoon stared at the woman sitting across from him in Seoul's most exclusive restaurant. His grandmother had just orchestrated the most elaborate setup of his life. Are you trying to intimidate me? Nia raised one perfectly arched eyebrow. Because I've had 8th graders with better threats. Ji-hoon leaned forward. This isn't a business meeting, is it? No, baby. She smiled, unimpressed by his power, his wealth, his carefully constructed danger. Your grandmother paid for my first-class ticket, showed me your photo, and said her grandson needs someone who won't take his brooding seriously. She picked up her menu. So here I am. And since I flew 14 hours for this setup, you're buying dinner. My grandmother is playing chess while you're playing checkers. She cut him off. Now are we ordering? Or are you going to keep trying to scare me with your bad boy act? Because I'm hungry, and that jacket is trying way too hard. For the first time in 5 years, Kwon Ji-hoon, head of Seoul's most feared crime family, felt something dangerous stir in his chest. Felt suspiciously like a smile. Hello, family. New story just dropped, and this one is going to leave you breathless. Make sure you follow this page so you don't miss a single moment. Drop your flag in the comments. Where are you watching from today? The first thing people noticed about Kwon Ji-hoon was that he looked like the final boss of a video game you'd never beat. Sharp jawline, sharper eyes, and the kind of quiet stillness that suggested he was always 3 moves ahead of everyone else in the room. The second thing they noticed was his hands. Elegant, precise, and rumored to have signed documents that made people disappear from society in ways that didn't technically count as murder. The third thing, if they were observant enough to catch it, was the thin scar running along his left eyebrow. A gift from his father's enemies when he was 17. A reminder of why he never let anyone get close enough to leave another mark. Tonight, those hands were gripping a crystal whiskey glass like it had personally offended him. The private dining room of Jungsik, Seoul's most exclusive restaurant, had been reserved under the pretense of a business meeting. His grandmother, Madame Kwon, had arranged it all. An American venture capitalist interested in investing in his legitimate restaurant chain. A Ms. A. Williams, supposedly running a firm that specialized in Asian market expansion. He should have known better. His grandmother hadn't accepted his single status for 32 years. She certainly wasn't going to start now. You really believed a venture capitalist wanted to meet you at 9 p.m. with roses on the table? Nia asked, scanning the menu with practiced efficiency. Her voice had the precise cadence of someone who closed deals for breakfast. The candles didn't tip you off? The wine already breathing. Your grandmother is thorough. My grandmother is manipulative. Ji-hoon signaled the waiter, who appeared instantly. The man bowed so deeply he nearly folded in half. She once befriended a prosecutor's mother for 8 months to get information about an investigation. This, he gestured between them. This is just Tuesday for her. Nia watched the interaction with the waiter, noting how the staff moved around Ji-hoon like planets orbiting a particularly dangerous sun. The man at the door, clearly security, not restaurant staff, kept his eyes on every corner of the room. The scar on Ji-hoon's eyebrow. The way other diners in the main room had gone silent when they walked past. So what do you actually do? She asked after they ordered. Because that man by the door has a gun-shaped bulge under his jacket. Our waiter looked like he was going to faint when you made eye contact. And your grandmother specifically said you needed someone who wouldn't run when they learned the truth. So, what's the truth? Ji-hoon studied her. Most people wouldn't ask so directly. Most people would pretend not to notice, would accept whatever sanitized version of reality he offered. But Nia Brooks was clearly not most people. What do you think I do? He countered. Based on the evidence? She took a sip of water. You run a restaurant chain that's probably laundering money for something much bigger. You have the demeanor of someone who gives orders, not takes them. And you have security even in private spaces, which means you're either paranoid or someone actually wants you dead. She placed her glass down precisely. Also, your watch costs more than my car. His lips quirked. You're observant. I'm a brand strategist. Reading people is my job. She leaned forward. So are we going to keep dancing? Or are you going to tell me what your grandmother got me into? Jihoon made a decision. He could offer the sanitized version, the one he gave to potential business partners and political connections. Or he could be honest, partially to scare her off, partially because he was curious how she'd react. And maybe, just maybe, because something about her direct approach made him want to respond in kind. My family has controlled organized crime in Seoul for 4 generations, he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. I oversee operations that include protection services, information brokerage, and several ventures that would concern law enforcement. I've done things that would make you never want to sit across from me again. My grandmother thinks I need to get married because I haven't smiled since 2019. Any questions? He waited for her to recoil, to make an excuse, to leave. Nia took a bite of the appetizer that had just arrived, chewed thoughtfully, swallowed. 2019? That's when everything went bad for everyone. That's not a personality flaw, that's collective trauma. Jihoon blinked. You're not concerned? About the crime family part? Baby, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I had an uncle who worked in logistics and always had too much cash. I had a cousin who knew people whenever anyone had problems. You think I don't recognize what that life looks like? She leaned forward. The difference is you're sitting here in a fancy restaurant trying to scare me off instead of lying. That's either stupid honest or a test. Which one? Maybe both, he admitted. Fair. She nodded approvingly. Now order me whatever's expensive because your grandmother owes me for that fake PowerPoint presentation, and you're the one with the credit card. Kong, his security, caught Jihoon's eye from across the room and mouthed, I like her. Jihoon ignored him. But he was smiling slightly, and Kong had never seen him smile at a date before. 50 minutes into dinner, Jihoon's phone vibrated. He glanced at it discreetly. Secretary Yoon, the woman who ran his legitimate business operations and blocked his grandmother's matchmaking attempts, had finally discovered the deception. Sir, I just discovered the investor meeting was fabricated. Your grandmother created a fake company website, fake LinkedIn profiles, and fake references. The woman coming is actually a blind date. Yes, I'm aware. She's already here. Pause. I'm so sorry, sir. Madam Kwan must have hacked my calendar system. Do you want me to extract you? Jihoon looked at Nia, who was currently schooling the sommelier on American wine regions with the confidence of someone who'd never been contradicted in her life. The sommelier looked both impressed and terrified. No, I'll handle this myself. Sir, send my grandmother flowers. And a note that says, well played. She'll know what it means. He hung up. Nia was watching him with those sharp, intelligent eyes. Your assistant just figured it out? Secretary Yoon. And yes, she's apologizing for the breach in security. Breach in security. Nia laughed. That's what we're calling it when grandmothers meddle? You don't know my grandmother. I know she spent more time on that fake business proposal than my ex-fiancé spent on our wedding plans. I know she included charts, market analysis, and a completely fabricated customer survey that looked legitimate enough to fool someone with an MBA. I know she sent me a business class ticket with a note that said, First impressions matter. And I know she called me yesterday to ask about my food allergies and favorite flowers. Nia raised an eyebrow. So I think I know enough to be impressed. Jihoon's expression shifted. Ex-fiancé. Oh, now you want my backstory? Nia's smile was sharp. Because I just admitted I was single and suddenly you're interested? Men are so predictable. I'm trying to understand why someone would agree to fly across the world for a business meeting that could have been a video call. Nia's expression softened slightly. Why do you think I came? Because my grandmother is persuasive. Your grandmother is brilliant. But that's not why I'm here. She set down her wine glass. 6 months ago I was engaged. Marcus, good on paper. Lawyer, came from the right family, looked great in photos. We'd been together 4 years. I built my whole business plan around us. Where we'd live, how we'd merge our careers, the timeline for everything. Her voice remained steady, but Jihoon caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Then I found out he'd been cheating for 2 years, with multiple women. One of them was my business partner. I'm sorry. Don't be. Best thing that ever happened to me. She said it with such conviction he almost believed her. I burned it all down, ended the engagement, dissolved the partnership, moved to a new apartment with nothing but my laptop and a plan to rebuild. I've spent 6 months doing nothing but working. My mom says I've forgotten how to be a person. She took a sip of wine. When your grandmother contacted me, I almost deleted it. But then I thought, what's the worst that could happen? I fly to Korea, it's a scam, I lose a few days and gain a story. Or it's real, and I get a business opportunity that helps me rebuild faster. And if it was a blind date, then at least I'd be eating good food and proving to myself I can still do things that scare me. In that moment, Jihoon realized something that made the danger sensors in his brain light up like emergency beacons. She wasn't fearless. She was terrified. She was just doing it anyway. That was more dangerous to his emotional walls than actual fearlessness would be. The bill never came. It never did, at establishments that knew better than to present Kwon Jihoon with anything resembling a request for payment. As they left, Nia noticed the staff's behavior, the careful deference, the slightly too deep bows, the way no one quite met Jihoon's eyes. So what happens now? She asked as they stepped into the cool Seoul evening. Kong was already pulling the car around. A sleek black Mercedes with windows tinted dark enough to be almost certainly illegal. I take you back to your hotel, Jihoon said. You enjoy your expenses-paid vacation in Seoul. We both tell my grandmother the date was a disaster, and she regroups for her next attempt. Is that what you want to happen? The directness of the question caught him off guard. Most people in his world communicated in layers. Implications, suggestions, careful evasions. Nia Brooks apparently had never met a direct question she didn't like. What I want is irrelevant, he said finally. You flew here under false pretenses. You deserve to enjoy your trip without obligation. That's not what I asked. The car pulled up. Kong got out to open the door, but Jihoon waved him off. They stood there on the sidewalk, Seoul's nightlife humming around them. A strange bubble of tension between them. No, Jihoon finally said. That's not what I want. Good. Because I have a counterproposal. She straightened, slipping seamlessly into what he suspected was her professional demeanor. Your grandmother hired me for brand consulting. Let's make it real. I'll analyze your restaurant chain, give you actual recommendations, and we'll have legitimate meetings during my stay. And the personal aspect? We'll see if it develops naturally. She smiled, and it transformed her face from striking to breathtaking. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people who've been set up by a meddling grandmother exploring if there's something worth pursuing. Jihoon felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Something that had been dormant for so long he almost didn't recognize it. Anticipation, interest, maybe even hope. I accept your proposal, he said, extending his hand formally. She took it, but instead of shaking, she pulled him slightly closer. One condition, no more fountain pen threats. Save that for people who deserve it. For the second time that night, Jihoon smiled. A real smile, not the practiced one he used in business situations. Deal. Kang's eyes widened from the driver's seat. He immediately texted Secretary Yoon. Boss smiled. Twice. What is happening? The time is now. If you're loving this story, you need to hit follow right now because things are about to get complicated. Drop a heart if you want to see what happens when Nia meets Madame Kwon face to face. The chess match is just beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, Jihoon learned that his grandmother hadn't just tricked him. She'd strategically outmaneuvered his entire emotional defense system. The business meetings quickly evolved into something that resembled actual dates, thinly disguised as work. Nia did analyze his restaurants, pointing out inconsistencies in branding, opportunities for expansion, and problems with the current marketing strategy. She was good, frighteningly good. But their meetings inevitably stretched from 1 hour to 3, to entire evenings spent talking about everything except business. You're telling me you've never been to a street food market? Nia looked at him in disbelief as they sat in his office overlooking the Han River. You own restaurants and you've never had tteokbokki from a street vendor? It's not safe, he said automatically. Too exposed. Too risky. That sounds exhausting. She leaned back in her chair. Living your whole life evaluating threats, avoiding public spaces, never experiencing the city you technically run. It's necessary. Is it? She met his gaze directly. Or is it just what you tell yourself, because it's easier than admitting you've built a prison and called it protection? The question hit closer to home than he wanted to admit. His phone rang before he could respond. His grandmother. I need to take this, he said, grateful for the interruption. Go ahead. Nia smiled. I have plans with her this afternoon anyway. What? But he was already answering the phone. Grandmother. Jihuna. Madame Kwan's voice was deceptively gentle. I'm calling to remind you that I'm taking Ms. Brooks shopping this afternoon. Unless you've scared her away already? I just heard about these plans. Did you? How interesting. Perhaps if you spent less time scowling and more time listening, you'd have known sooner. The gentle tone never wavered, but the rebuke was clear. I like this one, Jihun. Don't ruin it with your brooding. I don't brood, grandmother. Nia snorted loudly enough for Madame Kwan to hear. Is that her? Put her on. Jihun reluctantly handed over the phone. Nia took it with a grin. Madame Kwan. Yes, I'm looking forward to it. No, he's been a perfect gentleman. She glanced at Jihun with mischief in her eyes. Well, he tried to intimidate me with a fountain pen story, but I've dealt with scarier PDA parents. Jihun could hear his grandmother's delighted laughter through the phone. He felt something between betrayal and resignation. The women in his life were going to be the death of him. 3 hours later, Jihun got a text from his grandmother. She negotiated a higher consulting fee than you pay your actual consultants. Marry her immediately. Grandmother. And from Nia. Your grandma tried to intimidate me with silence and hard stares. I teach negotiation workshops, Jihun. Amateur hour. Also, she's taking me shopping tomorrow. You're paying. Jihun stared at the messages, torn between horror and amusement. His grandmother had met her match. So had he. That night, against his better judgment, against every security protocol he'd established over the last 5 years, Jihun found himself being dragged through Guangjiang Market. Kong followed at a distance, looking deeply uncomfortable about the crowd and the lack of controlled access points. You have to try this, Nia insisted, pulling him toward a Bindiadik stall. The vendor, an older woman with a weathered face, didn't recognize him, didn't bow too deeply, didn't look at him with fear or calculation. She just handed over 2 sizzling pancakes and accepted Nia's payment with a nod. The anonymity was intoxicating. For a moment, Jihun wasn't the head of the Kwan syndicate. He wasn't responsible for an empire. He was just a man eating street food with a beautiful woman who didn't seem to care about his power or his position. So, Nia asked, watching him take a bite, worth the security risk? Jihun couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten something this simple, this satisfying. Yes, he admitted. Worth it. She grinned. See? Sometimes the best things happen when you step outside that fortress you've built. Sometimes people get hurt when they step outside the fortress. He countered quietly. Sometimes people die inside fortresses too. She met his gaze. At least outside they lived first. The words stayed with him as they continued through the market. Nia holding his hand like it was nothing, like touching him wasn't an act that required permission or consideration. She pointed out stalls, bargained shamelessly with vendors in her limited Korean, and laughed when he got sauce on his expensive shirt. You know this is cashmere? He said, dabbing at the stain. I know you can afford another one. She tugged him toward another food stall. Come on, we're trying hotdog next. Kong, watching from a distance, texted Secretary Yoon. I think he's broken. In a good way. Is that possible? Yoon texted back. Impossible. Send video evidence. Kong discreetly filmed his boss laughing. Actually laughing. As Nia got sugar on her nose from the sweet pancake. He sent the video with the caption, Madame Kwan is a genius. Yoon's response was immediate. Oh my God. Alert the board. The apocalypse is coming. But it wasn't the apocalypse. It was something much more dangerous. Something Jihun had spent 5 years avoiding. Something he thought he'd eliminated from his life entirely. It was happiness. Simple, unguarded, dangerous happiness. And in his world, happiness was just another word for vulnerability. Late night, his penthouse. They were drinking wine after a business dinner that had gradually, inevitably, turned into a date. The Seoul skyline sparkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a sea of lights stretching to the horizon. Nia stood by the glass, silhouetted against the city. "Why does your grandmother want you married so badly?" she asked, swirling her wine. "You're only 32. That's not old." "In my family, it is." Jihoon watched her from the couch. "My father married at 22. My grandfather at 20. That's not a reason. That's a tradition." She turned to face him. "What's the real reason?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying the reflection of light in his glass. With anyone else, he would have deflected, changed the subject. But after 2 weeks of Nia's direct questions and even more direct stares, he found himself answering honestly. "Because she knows I'm alone," he said finally. "Not just unmarried, alone. I have people who work for me, people who fear me, people who need me. But I don't have anyone who stays because they want to." "That sounds exhausting." "I've never thought about it that way." "That's because you've never had someone around who tells you the truth." Nia came to sit beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. "You've surrounded yourself with people who tell you what you want to hear. And what do you think I want to hear? That you're intimidating, that you're in control, that you don't need anything or anyone." Her eyes were soft in the dim light. "But everyone needs someone, Jihoon. Even scary mafia bosses with too many suits." The comment should have irritated him. Instead, he found himself smiling. "I don't have too many suits. You have a walk-in closet with nothing but black and gray. It's like a funeral home in there. I have navy." "Oh, wild man." She laughed, and the sound did something to his chest. Something warm and dangerous. "Next you'll tell me you own jeans." "I don't own jeans." "Of course you don't." She shook her head, still smiling. Then her expression grew serious. "Can I ask you something personal? You've been asking personal questions since we met. This one's different." She set down her wine glass. "What happened in 2019? You said you haven't smiled since then. I thought it was a joke, but your grandmother said the same thing." The question cut closer than she knew. Jihoon stood up abruptly, walking to the window. The city below, his city, looked peaceful from this height. "It wasn't. My father was arrested in 2019, he said finally, his back to her. "Not for the things he actually did, those he was careful about. For financial crimes that a rival family manufactured evidence for. He'll be in prison for another 15 years. He heard Nia rise, felt her presence behind him. "When he went away, I had to take over. I was 27. I had to become someone people feared more than they'd feared him, or the entire organization would have collapsed. Rivals would have moved in. People who depended on us would have suffered. So you became what you needed to become," she said quietly. "And somewhere in that process, I stopped being anything else." He turned to face her. "The man who took over in 2019 doesn't laugh at street food vendors, doesn't walk through markets holding hands, doesn't spend evenings talking about nothing important with a woman he just met. You know what I see when I look at you?" Nia stepped closer. "I see someone who's been playing a character for so long. He forgot it was a performance. What if it's not a performance anymore? What if this is who I am now? Then why are you up here with me asking that question?" She took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "The person you became to survive. That person doesn't wonder if there's something else. You're wondering. That means the real you is still in there, waiting for permission to exist." Jihoon looked down at their joined hands, hers smaller but somehow stronger, grounding him in a way he couldn't explain. When was the last time someone had touched him without fear? When was the last time he'd allowed it? "You make it sound simple," he said. "It's not simple. It's probably the hardest thing you'll ever do." Her smile was soft, understanding. "But I think you're up for the challenge." In that moment, with the city spread beneath them and Nia looking at him like she saw something worth saving, Jihoon felt a wall inside him crack. Just a hairline fracture in a fortress he'd spent years building. but it was enough to let in something he'd forgotten existed. Hope. The chemistry is unreal, fam. But you know what happens in every good story. When things get sweet, life gets sour. Make sure you're following to see what happens when Jihoon's past comes knocking. Drop a comment if you're already invested. Jihoon had survived in his world by never having weaknesses. No attachments, no leverage, no pressure points. And now he'd spent 2 weeks creating the biggest vulnerability of his life. He should have known it would cost him. 3 days later, they were at Namsan Tower. Jihoon had rented out the entire observation deck, a gesture that made Nia roll her eyes and call him extra. Even as she smiled, they stood side by side, looking out over Seoul as the sun set, painting the city in shades of gold and amber. "It's beautiful," she said. "I've been here 2 weeks and I still can't get over how the city looks at sunset." "I haven't been up here in years," Jihoon admitted. "Not since before my father was arrested." "Why not?" "No reason to come." He glanced at her. No one to bring. Before she could respond, his phone rang. Secretary Yoon's number. She never called after hours unless something was wrong. Very wrong. "Excuse me," he said, stepping away. "I need to take this." Nia nodded, turning back to the view. Jihoon answered, already tensing. "What is it?" "Sir." Yoon's voice was ice. "We have a problem. Director Shin from the Park Syndicate is in Seoul. He knows about the American woman." Director Shin. The man who framed Jihoon's father. The rival who'd been waiting 5 years for Jihoon to make a mistake. How? Unclear. But he's asking questions. Making sure people know he's asking. He wants you to know he knows. "Is she safe?" "For now. I have people on her hotel." "But Jihoon." She never used his first name. "He's not going to move against her directly. That's not his style. He's going to use her as proof that you're compromised. That you're weak. That the Kwan Syndicate has a vulnerability now." The implication was clear. In his world, falling in love wasn't just personal. It was a strategic liability. Other families would see Nia as leverage. His own people might see him as compromised. Understood. His voice was emotionless. "Arrange a meeting with the heads. Tomorrow morning." "Already done. And sir, be careful." He hung up and turned to find Nia watching him, her expression concerned. "Bad news. Business complications." The lie came automatically. Nothing to worry about. But even as he said it, he was calculating. Planning. How to keep her safe. How to neutralize Shin. How to protect both his heart and his empire without sacrificing either. For now, he would play the part she'd seen through. The cold, controlled crime boss. The man who had spent 5 years making sure no one could hurt him. Because someone was about to try. And they would use her to do it. That night, Jihoon didn't sleep. He paced his penthouse, making calls, issuing orders, running scenarios. By morning, he had a plan. Not one he liked, but one that would work. Nia arrived at his office the next day, wearing a sleek black dress and the confident expression that had first caught his attention. She'd been scheduled to present her final recommendations for the restaurant chain's rebranding. A legitimate meeting to end their pretend business relationship. She walked in and immediately frowned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Jihoon kept his voice neutral. "Let's get started on your presentation." "No." She set down her portfolio. "Something's wrong. You're doing that thing with your face." "What thing?" "That blank expression that says you're hiding something. You've been doing it less and less and now it's back." She crossed her arms. "What happened between last night and now?" This was the problem with letting someone see you. Really see you. They noticed when the mask went back on. "You need to go back to Chicago." "Excuse me? Your flight is tomorrow morning. First class. I've already had your things packed." "You what?" Her voice rose sharply. This was a mistake. All of it. The words felt like stones in his mouth. Heavy and painful. "I let myself forget what I am. And now there are people who want to use you to hurt me. The only way to keep you safe is to make sure you're not here." Nia didn't yell. She got quiet. Controlled. The voice she used when someone underestimated her in a boardroom. "Let me make sure I understand. Something threatened you, so your solution is to make my decisions for me. Pack my bags without asking. Book my flight without consulting me. Remove me from the situation like I'm a package that got delivered to the wrong address. I'm trying to protect you. No, you're trying to control an outcome because you're scared. And instead of being honest about that fear, you're disguising it as protection. She stepped closer, anger radiating from her in waves. I've been underestimated my entire career. I've had men decide what I could handle without asking me. I've had people try to remove me from situations because they thought they knew better. Another step closer, her eyes never leaving his. I didn't fly across the world, fall for a man with more walls than a fortress, and finally start feeling like myself again just to be dismissed the moment things get hard. You don't understand what these people can do. Then explain it to me. She slammed her hand on his desk. Treat me like a partner instead of a liability. Because I promise you, Kwon Ji-hoon, I have survived things you can't imagine. And I did it by being smart, not by running. The silence that followed was deafening. Ji-hoon stared at her, this woman who refused to be frightened away, who challenged him at every turn, who looked at danger and demanded explanations instead of protection. Director Shin, he said finally. He's the man who framed my father. He runs the Park Syndicate. He's been waiting for years for me to show weakness, and now he's found it. He met her gaze directly. You, me, people in my position don't have attachments. They're too dangerous, too easily leveraged. Shin knows about you, and he's already using it to undermine me. He's calling a meeting of the major syndicates, supposedly to discuss territory. In reality, he wants to challenge my leadership. Because of me. Because I've shown that I care about something other than the organization. Because I've been seen in public, vulnerable, with someone who could be used against me. Nia absorbed this, her anger slowly shifting to something more calculating. So your solution is to send me away and pretend none of this happened. Prove to everyone that I meant nothing. It's the safest option. For who? Your ego or my life? Ji-hoon tensed. This isn't about ego. People die in these power struggles. I understand that. Nia's voice softened slightly. But running away isn't the answer. That just proves Shin right. That you're compromised. Weak. What's your alternative? Let me help. She sat on the edge of his desk. I'm a brand strategist, Ji-hoon. My entire career is about perception and positioning. You're facing a perception problem, not just a security threat. This isn't a marketing campaign. These are dangerous people. So are you. She held his gaze. But you're forgetting your greatest advantage. Which is me. She smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut glass. The outsider with nothing to lose and everything to prove. What are you suggesting? Take me to the meeting. Absolutely not. Not as your girlfriend. As your brand consultant. Her eyes gleamed. The American expert you've hired to modernize your operations. Show them you're thinking bigger than Seoul. That you're already 10 steps ahead. Shin won't believe it. He doesn't have to believe it. The others just have to consider it possible. She leaned forward. Trust me, Ji-hoon. This is what I do. He should refuse. Send her away anyway. Keep her safe. But looking at her determined expression, he knew two things with absolute certainty. First, she wouldn't go willingly. And second, underestimating Nia Brooks had been everyone else's mistake. He didn't intend to repeat it. I need to speak to my grandmother first, he said finally. Nia's smile widened. She already knows. Who do you think I've been getting my information from? And that's when Ji-hoon realized he'd been outmaneuvered. Again. OMG y'all. I cannot with this story. Follow right now because the next part shows what happens when Nia faces down Seoul's most dangerous crime families. If you think she's been fearless so far, just wait until you see what she does next. Drop a comment if you're ready for this showdown. The neutral meeting ground was a private room at Cloud 9, a restaurant owned by one of the smaller syndicates. Traditionally neutral territory. 5 family heads would be present plus their seconds. Director Shin had already arrived, according to Kang's reconnaissance, and was holding court like he'd already won. Remember the plan? Jihoon said as they rode the elevator up. Nia wore a sharp black suit, one of Madame Kwan's, altered overnight by the family's personal tailor. She carried a sleek leather portfolio and wore an expression of professional detachment. "Stay behind me. Don't speak unless spoken to." "I remember the plan," she said calmly. "I just have no intention of following it." Before he could respond, the elevator doors opened. Kong moved first, checking the hallway before nodding. Jihoon adjusted his tie, smoothed his expression into the cold mask he wore for business, and stepped out. Nia followed, head high, shoulders back, the picture of confident professionalism. The private room fell silent as they entered. 5 men of varying ages sat around a large table, their seconds standing behind them. Director Shin, a man in his late 40s with a deceptively gentle appearance, sat at the far end. His smile was thin and satisfied, like a cat who'd cornered its prey. "Kwon Jihoon," he greeted, voice silky. "How generous of you to join us. And you've brought your friend." The implication hung in the air. Jihoon felt rather than saw Nia stiffen beside him. "This is Ms. Brooks," he said coolly. "My American consultant. She's advising on our global expansion." Murmurs around the table. This wasn't what they'd expected. "How convenient," Shin smirked. "A consultant who accompanies you to Namsan Tower at sunset, who holds your hand in public markets, who visits your grandmother for tea. Very professional." "Mr. Shin," Nia spoke before Jihoon could respond. Her voice was calm, controlled, with the slight edge she used in negotiations. "I understand you have concerns about my presence. Would you prefer to address them directly, or continue this passive-aggressive approach?" "Either works for me, but direct is more efficient." Silence. Then one of the older family heads actually chuckled. Shin's eyes narrowed. "You bring an outsider to our meeting and allow her to speak out of turn? This proves my point, Kwon. You've become compromised." "Actually," Nia set her portfolio on the table. "I'm here because I understand something about your organization that you don't." She looked around the table. "All of your organizations, in fact." Jihoon had practiced neutral expressions for years, but even he struggled not to react. This wasn't the plan. She was supposed to stay quiet, let him handle Shin's accusations, then leave. And what could an American possibly understand about our traditions? Shin's voice dripped condescension. "That they're killing you." Nia opened her portfolio and removed several documents. "While you've been focused on territory disputes and internal politics, international syndicates have been moving into Asian markets. Digital crime, legitimate business fronts, political connections beyond Seoul. They're thinking globally while you're fighting over neighborhoods." She pushed a folder toward the center of the table. "The Kwan Syndicate recognized this shift. That's why I'm here. Not as Mr. Kwan's girlfriend, though your fixation on that rumor is telling, but as a strategist hired to modernize operations." One of the family heads reached for the folder. Shin shot him a warning look, but the man ignored it. He opened the documents, eyes widening as he scanned the contents. "What is this?" he asked. "Market analysis, profit projections, a 5-year strategy for transitioning certain operations to legitimate business fronts with international potential." Nia's smile was professional, confident. The kind of planning that visionary leaders do. The kind that ensures survival in a changing landscape. Jihoon stared at the documents, recognizing his grandmother's handwriting on some of the notes. How long had Madame Kwan been preparing for this? How many steps ahead had she been? "This is a distraction," Shin snapped. "Kwan is weak. He's allowed himself to be compromised. His father would never." "Director Shin," Nia cut in, her voice suddenly sharp. "I understand you have a personal vendetta against the Kwan family. I understand you were responsible for Mr. Kwan Sr.'s imprisonment. What I don't understand is why you're so focused on the past when everyone else here is clearly concerned with the future." The room went deadly still. No one mentioned Shin's role in the elder Kwan's downfall. No one dared. "You know nothing." Shin's voice was ice. "I know you've been communicating with federal prosecutors," Nia said calmly. I know you offered to provide testimony about everyone in this room in exchange for immunity. The blood drained from Shin's face. The other family heads turned to stare at him, expressions shifting from surprise to anger. That's a lie, Shin hissed. Is it? Nia removed another document from her portfolio. This is a transcript of your meeting 3 weeks ago with Prosecutor Kim. The one you thought was completely confidential. The one where you offered to, and I quote, provide evidence sufficient to dismantle all major criminal organizations in Seoul in exchange for full immunity and relocation. She slid the document toward the center of the table. One of the family heads snatched it up, reading quickly, his expression darkening with each line. Where did you get this? He demanded. Madame Kwan has been monitoring Director Shin for years, Nia said simply. She anticipated this move. The prosecutor was her contact. It was a trap, and Director Shin walked right into it. The room erupted. Accusations flew. Security personnel tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Jihoon remained perfectly still, watching Nia with a mixture of awe and horror. She just detonated a bomb in the middle of Seoul's criminal hierarchy, and she was standing calmly in the blast radius. You think you can trust this outsider? Shin shouted, desperate now. This American? You're right, Nia answered, voice cutting through the chaos. I am an outsider. I have no loyalty to any of you, which means I also have no reason to lie to protect anyone's ego. Director Shin was going to destroy all of you to save himself. The only reason you know that now is because I have no stake in keeping his secrets. She looked around the table, meeting each family head's eyes. The question isn't whether you can trust me. The question is whether you can afford to ignore what I've shown you. The oldest family head, a man in his 70s who had been silent throughout, finally spoke. Kwon Jihoon, your grandmother planned this. It wasn't a question. My grandmother suggested Ms. Brooks would be an asset to our organization, Jihoon said carefully. I didn't realize how right she was until today. The old man nodded, then turned to Shin. You have until midnight to leave Seoul. After that, the old agreements no longer protect you. Shin's face contorted with rage. This isn't over, he spat, rising from his seat. Actually, Jihoon finally spoke, his voice deadly calm. It is. Shin stormed out, his seconds scrambling to follow. The remaining family heads gathered the documents Nia had brought, studying them with new interest. Ms. Brooks, the old man said, Madame Kwan invites you to tea tomorrow. She says to bring your appetite. The conversation may be lengthy. Nia nodded respectfully. I'll be there. As they left the restaurant, Jihoon felt like he was walking through a dream. The meeting that should have been his downfall had instead cemented his position. The woman who should have been his weakness had proven to be his strength. In the elevator, he finally found his voice. You could have told me what you were planning. Would you have let me do it? No. That's why I didn't tell you. She smiled, the professional mask dropping away to reveal the woman he'd fallen for. Your grandmother gave me all of that information, you know? Every conversation, every shopping trip, every casual story about family history. She was giving me pieces, waiting to see what I'd do with them. What did she say when you told her your plan? About time someone in this family understood strategy. She never said that to me. Baby, she's your grandmother. She loves you too much to be objective. I'm just the consultant. Nia's eyes sparkled with mischief. They stepped into the waiting car. Kong was driving, trying and failing not to eavesdrop. You could have been hurt, Jihoon said quietly. You walked into a room with some of the most dangerous people in Seoul. And you've been walking into those rooms alone for 5 years. Nia took his hand. Maybe you don't have to do that anymore. He looked at her, really looked. At the woman who'd flown across the world because of a fake PowerPoint, who'd faced down crime lords with nothing but market analysis and confidence, who'd somehow dismantled his carefully constructed walls like they were made of paper. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Relationship, partnership, whatever this is. Neither do I. I told you my last relationship ended with cheating and betrayal. I'm making this up as I go. That's not comforting. It's not supposed to be comforting. It's supposed to be honest. She squeezed his hand. Your grandmother tricked us both. Maybe we should be mad about that. But I'm not. Because whatever this is, whatever we're building, it's the most real thing I've felt in years. And I'm not ready to let that go. Jihoon felt something shift inside him. The final wall coming down. Neither am I. 6 months later, Kwon Jihoon, head of the Kwon Syndicate, feared throughout Seoul's underworld, stood in his grandmother's garden and watched Nia Thompson argue with Madame Kwon about wedding invitation fonts. Ivory is not the